Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with stuffed pasta wheels. That's right, if I'd known these were going to come out as good as they did, I would have used much more impressive ingredients for the filling than frozen spinach and canned meat. But despite the fact that I went full quarantine cuisine on these, it's actually the technique for how to make these that I want you to focus on, which really did work out incredibly well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with a very simple pasta-like dough. And that'll begin with some all-purpose flour plus some salt. And then into the middle of that, we will crack one large egg, plus a small splash of cold fresh water. And then what we'll do once we have everything in the bowl is go ahead and take a spoon, and we will stir this until it comes together to form a shaggy dough. Oh yeah, you heard me. A shaggy dough. And as usual, once we do have a shaggy dough formed, we will switch to our hands and press everything together. And then once that's almost happened, we'll go ahead and dump everything onto the table, where we will knead it for just about a minute or so. And yes, most pasta doughs are made with all eggs, but I was attempting to make the exact amount of dough I needed, and one egg was not going to be quite enough moisture, but 2 eggs was going to be too much. So I simply solved that problem by adding a little bit of water. And of course, if it feels a little bit sticky, go ahead and sprinkle some more flour on. And like I said, we will give that a quick kneading until it kind of smooths out, and we're left with a relatively firm, but still pliable disc of dough. And then once that's set, we'll go ahead and wrap it in plastic, and we'll pop that in the fridge to rest for at least an hour before we try to roll it out. Okay, we never want to rush a dough. Always give it time to rest. And that will always make it easier to work with. And while that's resting, we can go ahead and make our filling, which I pretty much did with 0 fresh ingredients, including 1 can of wild pink salmon, which isn't pretty, but it's pretty good for you and pretty good tasting. And what we'll do is break that up with a fork before very quickly hiding it with breadcrumbs. Oh yeah, that's better. And then to that we will add a whole bunch of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, at which point we'll take a fork and give this a very thorough mixing before we add our wet ingredients. And by the way, regarding the cheese, I normally implore you to use the real stuff, the Parmigiano Reggiano, but I didn't this time. I actually used a Parmesan from Wisconsin, which I'm happy to report was pretty nice. But anyway, we will give that a very good mix before adding 1 package of frozen chopped spinach that we thawed first and then squeezed out all the water. I also tossed in a large egg, as well as a couple crushed garlic cloves. And then we'll want to season that up with some freshly ground black pepper, a few shakes of cayenne, and of course some salt, at which point it was ready to stir together. And I wasn't really sure if I was going to need 1 or 2 eggs, and whenever we're not sure of that, we always want to just start with 1. And then if it seems too dry, we can always add the other one, which this did. So I tossed that in and kept stirring, eventually ending up with the soft and spreadable filling I was hoping for. Which reminds me to remind you, this really is just a technique video, and you get to make any filling you want. I mean, you guys are after all the Daniel Steels of your pasta wheels. And speaking of trashy content, well, the canned salmon and frozen spinach did come out pretty nice. Any and all of your favorite ravioli fillings would work perfectly here. And that's it. Once our filling is set, we'll just wrap that up and pop it in the fridge until we're ready to use it. And then assuming our dough's rested long enough, we'll go ahead and pull that out. And we'll unwrap it and transfer it onto a well-floured surface. And then before we start rolling, we'll use our hands to kind of form this into a rectangular shape. And then once that happens, we'll go ahead and switch to the rolling pin. And then using just enough flour so it doesn't stick, we will attempt to roll this out into a fairly squarish rectangle, about 1/8 of an inch thick. And if I have to give you a measurement, it's probably something close to 14 by 12. But as I'm doing a fine job demonstrating, it does not have to be perfectly shaped. So this is what I ended up with. And I was pretty happy with it. Or at least that's what I told it. And then one little trick here once that's rolled out is to take our rolling pin and sort of flatten out that far edge a little more. Okay, that's going to be the edge that we roll towards. And I think this is going to seal and look a little better if that's a little thinner along that edge. And then once that's set, we'll go ahead and transfer on our filling, pretty much going all the way to the edges, except for about 3 or 4 inches along that edge we just spoke of. And we'll attempt to distribute that and spread it out as evenly as possible. And then before we roll this up, we should probably take a pastry brush, or better yet, a couple clean fingertips, and we will slightly dampen that exposed dough before very carefully and very confidently rolling this up. And we definitely want to roll it fairly tight so we don't have any big air pockets, but we also don't want to smash and press that filling too much either.